Day 620 of the Trump administration, and there are new and potentially damaging revelations about Supreme Court nominee, federal judge Brett Kavanaugh, many of them still rolling out tonight, even as the president defended his nominee tonight before a rally in Tennessee.
They've been trying to destroy him since the very first second he was announced. He's a good man, great student, great intellect. Never had a problem. All of a sudden, no, let's go back to high school. They maybe should go before high school.
There is new reporting out tonight from the New York Times and Bloomberg. It says Kavanaugh was involved in a bar fight in New Haven, Connecticut back in 1985 while a junior at Yale. The Times adds that Kavanaugh had been questioned about it by New Haven police. Kavanaugh's former classmate at Yale, Chad Ludington, spoke to Bloomberg about that fight. Yesterday, he released a statement describing Kavanaugh as, quote, belligerent and aggressive after drinking. Here is what Kavanaugh said to the committee about his drinking last week.
I drank beer with my friends. Almost everyone did. Sometimes I had too many beers, but I did not drink beer to the point of blacking out.
Earlier this evening, his former classmate offered a different assessment.
I can unequivocally say that in denying the possibility that he ever blacked out from drinking and in downplaying the degree and frequency of his drinking, Brett has not told the truth. I felt it was my civic duty to tell of my experience while drinking with Brett.
Chad Ludington went on to say much more. He said he's already been in touch with the FBI about Kavanaugh. This morning, President Trump was asked about the conflicting accounts of Kavanaugh's drinking.
There are now concerns that he may have lied or mischaracterized his drinking while testifying. If they find that he did, do you think that bars him from being your Supreme Court nominee?
Well, I watched him. I was surprised at how vocal he was about the fact that he likes beer. And he's had a little bit of difficulty. I mean, he talked about things that happened when he drank. I mean, this is not a man that said that alcohol was that he was perfect with respect to alcohol.
Please note there, the president did not quote Kavanaugh accurately and went further than Kavanaugh did in his own sworn testimony. Tonight, there are also new questions concerning Kavanaugh and his second accuser, Deborah Ramirez. She has alleged Kavanaugh exposed himself to her while they were both at a party at Yale, something he denies. NBC News reports tonight that before Ramirez went public with her allegation, published in The New Yorker, quote, the judge and his team were communicating behind the scenes with friends to refute the claim, according to text messages obtained by NBC News. Those texts sent between two of Kavanaugh's friends suggest, quote, that the nominee was personally talking with former classmates about Ramirez's story in advance of the New Yorker article that made her allegation public. That is critically important because Kavanaugh said under questioning and under oath that he learned about the Ramirez allegation only when it was published in The New Yorker. NBC News has confirmed that the FBI has spoken to Ramirez. And the lawyer for Kavanaugh's high school friend, Mark Judge, says he has also spoken with the FBI, but that his interview has not been completed as of yet. Last Thursday, the first accuser, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, testified Judge was the one in the room during Kavanaugh's alleged assault during a house party. Ford's friend Leland Kaiser, who is said to be at that party, has also taken part in an FBI interview, according to her attorney. There has been much debate over the scope of this investigation, and Democrats say they worry Republicans may try to rein in the Bureau's agents on this. Today, the White House signed off on the Bureau expanding its inquiry beyond that set of witnesses, offering the agency to follow any leads they wish while still maintaining the same Friday deadline.
I think the FBI should do what they have to do to get to the answer. I want them to do a very comprehensive investigation, whatever that means, according to the senators and the Republicans and the Republican majority. I want them to do that. Now, with that being said, I'd like it to go quickly.
Today, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was determined to signal full steam ahead.
If you listen carefully, Mr. President, you can practically hear the sounds of the Democrats moving the goalposts. The time for endless delay and obstruction has come to a close. Judge Kavanaugh's nomination is out of committee. We're considering it here on the floor. And, Mr. President, we'll be voting this week.
With that, let's bring in our leadoff panel on a Monday night. Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times. Sean Henry, former executive assistant director at the FBI. And Mimi Rocah, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, now a distinguished fellow in criminal justice at Pace University's Law School. Good evening and welcome to you all. Peter, you shared the byline breaking the news today that the White House, I'll say this, it had the air of a White House relenting in expanding the reach and scope of the FBI investigation. You have also written about the fact that it's not without its risk.
Well, that's exactly right. The White House passed along the list that Senate Republicans gave them witnesses they wanted the FBI to interview. There's only 4 names, of course. Rebecca Ramirez, who was the second accuser after Christine Blasey Ford, and the 3 people that Christine Blasey Ford say were in the House when her incident happened in the early 1980s. And that was it. That was what the FBI was told to do. And when that got out, that caused a lot of consternation among Democrats, but also among the handful of Senate Republicans, including Jeff Flake, who have been concerned about this nomination now for weeks. Jeff Flake and Chris Coons, a Democrat from Delaware who's worked with him to initiate this investigation, got in touch with the White House and made clear that this wasn't acceptable to them. The president saw these stories and obviously decided as well that it didn't look good anyway if it was seemed to be so restricted that it wasn't a serious investigation. They would only generate more problems among the Republicans they're trying to recruit over to Judge Kavanaugh. He went ahead and gave Don McGahn, the White House counsel, instructions to tell the FBI to go ahead and follow their leads, interview anybody they thought they needed to interview, as long as it was done this week.
Sean Henry, I need not tell you the FBI is not autonomous. And they hate being the story, which is what they have not liked thus far about this administration. But what I mean by that is they receive orders and follow them. Are you convinced that agents in field offices feel they have received their orders, and in living rooms around the country tonight, where appropriate, there are agents sitting this close asking people, potential witnesses in this story, for their testimony?
I have no doubt they're working around the clock now, interviewing people, taking the results of those interviews, chronicling them. That information is going through the Department of Justice and to the White House. So the FBI is not going to wait a week to prepare a report and then send it. They're getting the results of these investigations, these interviews contemporaneously. They're being submitted. So there may be direction and guidance coming from the Department of Justice and ultimately from the White House. So while I believe that they'll have the opportunity to conduct their investigation, the parameters may change as the information goes back into the White House through the Department of Justice.
So somewhere, tell me, there is a whiteboard and a map of the nation, and there's a red pin on New Haven, Connecticut, where field agents are at Yale looking into all things in the vicinity. There's a red pin in Bethesda, Maryland, and the environs. There's a red pin for Dr. Blasey Ford in California, where presumably they are re-interviewing her, and that kind of thing.
I imagine this is being worked out of FBI headquarters as a central nucleus for this. And there are leads that are being cast throughout the United States. When results of interviews come back, if the agents have the authority and the opportunity to continue to follow those leads logically as they would take them to try and get to the bottom of this, answer all the questions, then additional leads will go out and other agents will be dispatched to follow up on those interviews.
Would you be interested in a bar fight in the 80s? Would that perk your...
You know, I think that it's important. What happened to somebody in their teens, in high school or in college, isolated incidents in and of themselves are the types of things that are looked at but then overlooked if they're isolated. I think the bigger issue here is a pattern of conduct, and if in fact it continues decades into the future, into the present time. The other piece is the credibility and the suitability of the candidate to sit on the bench. And if in fact the candidate made statements under oath to the Senate and they were misstatements, or if he had perjured himself, those are the types of issues that agents will chronicle, they're going to follow, and they're going to present them forward.
That's exactly where I'm going to go with our wise in-house counsel tonight. So, Mimi, this NBC News story that, let's call it a campaign, small c, of text messages were going out to old friends to say, listen, there's something coming out, please back up our guy. The story, I think, in part alleges that some of them may have come from Kavanaugh. Two-tiered question for you. Is there anything illegal if I'm coming up on a big moment in my hearings and I get wind of something bad coming? Second, is it really bad that this federal judge is already sworn to saying he didn't see the allegation we're talking about until it came out in the New Yorker and we all read it?
Right. So the first question is, it could be illegal if Kavanaugh and his team got word that Ramirez's allegations were coming out, which is what sounds like happened. And Kavanaugh himself reached out to people to say, hey, you know, this is not unlike things we've talked about with Trump before.
Yeah.
And you know, it's how close did he come to helping them refresh their memory? He shouldn't have reached out directly. He should have left that to his legal team.
That would be extraordinary for a sitting federal judge.
It would, but it sounds like that might have happened, that he might have reached out directly. I mean, we're based on the reporting. It says that her texts refer to Brett reaching out to her. So, I mean, look, we don't know for sure, but that's something that needs to be looked into, because if he did, that's highly, highly inappropriate and could border on illegal. Even his team doing that, I mean, it depends what they said. If they were simply asking questions, what do you remember? You know, there are perfectly legitimate ways to do it. If they were pressuring people in any way, if they were trying to refresh their memories or get their story straight, that's a big no-no, to put it simply.
And the allegation comes out in the New Yorker. He says that's when he first learned about it. But any of these texts would put that in doubt.
It would. I mean, again, it sounds like, you know, we're hearing this from someone who has the text. This is why this investigation is so important, and someone needs to really speak directly to the person who has the text, which it sounds like they've been trying to reach the FBI and it hasn't happened yet. So that's a little troubling. And my guess is that that might be because of limits that were put on the FBI initially. So now hopefully they'll be free to talk to these witnesses directly. But yes, if he you know, did know about this ahead of time, but testified that he didn't know about it until the time of the New Yorker. Look, that's definitely not true. Could you prove a perjury case based on that? I wouldn't want to bring that case. But that's not the standard here. The standard is, as we've all been saying, is this a person who is being forthright and honest and should be on the Supreme Court? And I think the growing impression over and over is that he was not completely forthright in his testimony.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.